And now we're going to create our crude version, which is the create, read, update, and delete with tests. So we're going to set up routes for creating, reading, updating, and deleting a model or a data that we will be adding into our system, with the ability to test them. So the idea with testing is that it allows us to automate our way of making sure that the system works as intended by doing automated tests. And for this one, we are doing some form of integration testing in essence. So let's go back to our code here. And what I want to do in the setup, I've added this up already, which is this is the idea of this video series, for us to be able to create a backend that allows us to create, read, update, and delete to-dos. And that is what we are going to do today. So let's work on it right now. So what I'm going to do, and that's a lot of to-dos, is to refactor this one so that it allows us to test it easily. And so I'm going to create a new file called app.js, and let's add it on our commit, git commit m or add app.js, and let's go and work on this one. So let's have this, let's cut this one out, put it here, and then exports dot build. So I'm creating a build function, which is an async, and the parameters of that async is options, which has a value of nope, not this one, logger true, and trust proxy true. And then we're creating an arrow function for this one, and for purpose, we are creating a parameter. So this is the function to call to initialize the server, and that is how we document our code. So app equals, let's just make it smaller, Fastify. So it's actually the same thing as this one. So instead of using this, we are calling it now app. And instead of hard coding sort of this one, we just put in opts. As you can see, it's the same object. Let's just add space here. We'll add this one, add a semicolon, and then we'll just add this part, rename server to app. Okay, and so after that we will return the application as a return. So that means we will just add returns an option. For this one, I just want to say that, let's say I want to add a logger, which is boolean. This allows us to make sure that it's actually an object. So if we check what is opts here, you can see that's the basis. And for this one, actually, if I remember it right, we can do this, which is a um, Fastify. Let's see if it works out. Yeah. Anyway, well, we'll just use this one for now. And then, so that is how we document our code. And to use that, we import it or require it, because the name of the function is build. We require it from app itself, and then we just do this const app equals to await build, and that is how we use app in this part. So this calls to build an app. We'll just add an additional part here to describe what this function is. Starts the application. So let's see if it works. It should work still. If I refresh, it will return success equals 2. So that means it works, or still works currently. So given that, let's try to add a test, and to do that we will need to install our setup, which is, I'm going to stop this for now. The usual way that I do test is through tap and with should. So I'm going to save this one out. So let's see. Now that took longer than expected. So what after that, I'm just going to add app.js as well as add index.js, and then that would mean commit m. So after checking my notes, we'll use refactor because we have refactor the code. Put app initialization to app.js, and then we'll add all get commit m what's this again, test, add modules for testing, not modules, add tap and should for testing. So how do we add a testing mechanism? We'll add a folder called test. We'll update this one with instead of using test only, we'll add this part, npx tap. That's the module that we have installed. So let's add that up. Test, add script for running test. Okay, so now that we have done that, we will create a simple test. Oops, not this one. New file, which is, for now, we will do this. So for those who are already used to testing, usually instead of using tap, the thing that people would use in Node.js is Mocha JS. But for for us here, we are using tap, but we can still use the same setup as Mocha. So what we can do is we require tap and use Mocha globals, which allows us to use the Mocha setup, and we'll use should, which I'll show you later what it is about. So first is we set a describe. So let's say the describe allows us to have a context of what we are testing. So let's do this. Let's add this one. And the describe is, let's say, for the root for root, which is this one. And it allows us to define the test case itself. So let's say it should return success true when called using get. So let's have an async function here. And for this one, let's have let the app. So the reason why we have to refactor is because it allows us to build the app on the test itself. So before running the test, we'll initialize the application. So initialize the backend application, and app equals await build. So given that, let's create a response. We can now inject our call, which has a method get and URL to do, and that's it basically. Let's try it out. So given that, how do we test it? So just to show you, console.log payload is equals to response.json. That would be stupid. Fonts payload, and then console.log payload. Okay. To run it, let's try npm test. And you can see that the test is running. Well, it has failed. Oh, I forgot this one. Yeah. So let's run it again. That's when you forget things that makes an error. So now it has passed. But let's see what was the return, which is this one. True. This is to know that this is actually the one that printed it out. Let's try adding a payload. Let's test it out again. And that's the thing that sort of sets it up. But this doesn't actually really test it out. What we need to do is to create assertions so that we know that it's really working well. So we know that when payload would have a success, and we also know that response would have a status code. So let's get those things out. Now, as you remember, I required should because it allows us to use the should keyword. So success should equal true, because that is what we are testing. It should return true, and in essence it should return true. And let's add and has a status code of 200. So status code should equal 200. Now we don't need this. As long as it sort of is equal, it should pass the test. So let's try it out again. And it says pass the test, okay. If we change the application itself, so let's say I set this into false and I do an npm test, this will, of course, will fail because you can see here on test app test.js, one failed, expected false to be true. What part did it fail? If we go up, we can see where it failed. This one, it should return success true and has a status code of 200 when called get, which is this one. So now that we are another thing that we want to show is, or I want to show, is this one. This is the coverage of your application. That means if it's 100%, that means all of your application code has been executed. And this allows us to know if parts of the code hasn't been executed. So if I add something here, so even if I do this, let's say if false, let's say this one, I copy this, we will see that on line 23, which is this one, this hasn't been tested. So it's a good way to know which lines are not tested, and if there would be a bug, it should be tested. So for now, we don't want to add additional, we don't want to use parameters for this one. So let's have handles the request for a given route, for which is in, for this example, the get. So at least now that we have set up the tests, let's go on into creating the other routes.